Hello, welcome to Resourceful Women, a podcast talking to women in the resource industry, so mining-related industries. And today, Betty Ann Nickerson has agreed to talk with me about her experience in mining. I'm Lynnel Reinson, your host, and we will just jump right in. So Betty Ann, how long have you been in the industry, and what has that been like for you in your career?
Hi, Lynnel. I have been in the industry for around 20, I'm going in my 24th year. I would say mining industry was my first pick. Okay. I was actually with the government in HR.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yes. And then, GWT in the north is a little bit different. So things were happening and I decided I needed a change. And lo and behold, Toledo Logistics happened to be right across the street. I'm Toledo, so I walked over and asked for a job, and they gave me one. After a year, I did try to resign, and they wouldn't let me. So they moved my job from the mine site to the online, and then I've been here ever since. And I just kind of stubborn, and decided I wanted to hit a certain position before I was going to retire.
Okay, so you had a life goal set.
Yep. So I figured, well, it'll take me around 20 years, and I actually did it. So in 20 years, I got promoted to an executive role, and I oversee the largest revenue generator for the company.
That's awesome. Yeah. So it was interesting that you were ready to call it at the end of the year. So when you started out, were you on the mine site?
I was on the mine site, and it's rotational work. So that depending on where you are in your life, it may or may not work, or you can make it work. And for me, it didn't work. I'm very, very athletic. And so being on sports teams, it was difficult. So, 2 weeks of participating in the sport I was in, 2 sports, and then having nothing at the time, because I was at Diavik, and Diavik wasn't completely set up yet. So it was more of a construction camp.
So they didn't have the facilities that they ultimately ended up having.
Yeah. Now they have a full gym, like an actual gymnasium, running track, every kind of piece of workout equipment. But they didn't have that then, right? So it was kind of like you had to kind of make up your own exercise routine.
And around to the Arctic.
Right. Yeah. And depending on the time of year, you couldn't go out during the winter because it was too cold, and then during the summer you still couldn't go because you had grizzlies. So it's right. So it was a lot of indoor, and you had to enjoy being indoors for almost 2 weeks at a time, and that can play a lot on someone, especially if you have allergies. And I'm allergic. I have a dust allergy, and it's extremely dusty there. So I was constantly very nasally, always, squirting my nasal spray. Yeah, but I've seen some people go to the site and completely thrive. It's right up their alley because it suits them, right? 2 weeks of hard work and then 2 weeks of play, right? So like a lot of the young guys I would run into, I'm like, where are you off to now? I'm like, well, we're going to drive down to Edmonton and hop on the first plane that takes us to Mexico, and then go for a week. Then they come back broke, and then they go back to work and do it all over again.
Make some more money and go on another trip. That's interesting. Yeah. So do you think if Diavik had been more fully formed, that with all of those facilities, do you think that might have impacted your decision, or was it just too much of the on and off for you?
It might have. I might have stayed if it was a little bit more set up. I mean, like, you're talking 20, like over 20 years ago.
20 years ago,
right? Yeah. So it's, I was also a lot younger then, right? So I also had, a lot of friends, and, the sports, and then there's the activities and the constant feeling of missing out.
Oh, okay.
Right. So you have that. And there's some times where I could be like, I actually looked forward to going just to get away from all the hustle and bustle, because there was really not a whole lot you can get on a mine site.
It sounds like you're describing an all or nothing kind of.
It is, we have employees there. I'm 24 years with the company, and I have 2 employees that have 25. They're just like 6 months more than me. They kind of just outbeat me for tenure for the company. And they're still at Diavik.
Okay. And do they do rotational?
And they do rotational, and they love it. It's just some of them, hit around 10, 15 years. And I remember talking to one of the guys, and they said, Actually, it's my spouse that said, don't quit. They're so, because the spouse is so, it's become just a normal thing for them. 2 weeks, they do their own thing, and the husband is not in the way.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of how they described it.
Yeah.
And they come home for 2 weeks, and then the spouse has to kind of adjust. Okay, now you're interrupting my routine. You're kind of actually in my way, and so I do see a lot of the guys, that I work with, even like I was just in Newfoundland over the Christmas break, and one of my in-laws he works on the rigs, so he does rotational work, 3 weeks in, 3 weeks out, and I was like,
3 and 3.
I'm like, wow, it's pretty
Yeah.
significant. And it was funny because they are on a rock, and weather does play havoc because they use helicopters to go back and forth.
Okay, so
And there
very
was-
much at the whim of the breezes.
It was very weather driven. And while we were there, he got delayed for about 4 days. Right?
On the working or the home side of
He
it?
was home side, right? So he was
Okay.
okay with that, but his wife wasn't, right? So we hung out with Colleen, and she's like,
She had things to do.
I already had plans. So see, and she dished it. He's like, oh, okay. And then, but then we were chatting, like, it was funny because we were all around the table chatting, like, how do you do it or whatever. And she's like, I just kind of do my everyday thing, because she's also rotational as well, right? Because she's the fire chief at the airport.
Okay.
So she kind of does that. So she doesn't adjust her schedule at all when Johnny's off, and Johnny doesn't screw up his schedule when she's off. So it's kind of funny when they do it, when they're like, okay, we need to book a vacation so we can see each other.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, they make it work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been on the other side of the rotations, but my partner was doing 4 days in, 3 days back. And that one was very interesting because having kids who were very young, and our first time with rotations was always with kids. And we hadn't ever had anything predictable. He always just traveled a ton. And then when it was time for the rotations, to me, it was so beautifully predictable. It was like Monday morning gone, Thursday evening back. I did all the things. And then when he came back, I remember working hard as the mom to make sure that he was still involved fully in the kids, because when they're so little, I think so much of relating to them is in the care part of it.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
have to do the getting dressed and all the things, and so that he was fully viewed by the kids as being like their 100% involved dad, and they got really, really used to it. And there was one weekend when he had to do a duty manager, so he was gone Monday, Thursday, didn't come back for the weekend. And man, it was like our house was upside down. The kids were completely off kilter. It was like, hey, this is dad time. Like, where is dad? And that was an interesting aspect of it too. So yeah, it does really, depend on what's going on at home and in family. So
Yeah, it's called structure, right?
20 years ago, you made the transition. So 1 year in, and then you came to work in Yellowknife.
Yeah.
And how was that transition for you?
It was awesome. It was really, really good. I can bring it forward now. At the time when we were going to resign, Lloyd Revolution, he was the manager for the company at the time. And I told him I was going to give him my notice, and then he decided that he would figure out, he had made a role for me in the office. He said, I'm going to find you a job. I don't want you to leave it. I said, okay. And then so that kind of started my path a little bit with him, right? He is plays a significant part in my life, in my early years, specifically like driving me down that path of which way am I going to go?
Okay.
You can't get a better guy, because he's the kind of guy that he can meet you once, he'll never forget your face and everything.
Oh, that's awesome.
And man, I wish I had that, because I'm like, I know the face, can't remember the name, right? So, but he's really, really good like that. But he, like he instilled, always be truthful.
Mm-hmm.
Take responsibility on your mistakes. Don't take credit when it's not yours to take, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like things like that. And I think those are really great traits to follow.
Yeah, to hold those and develop them and actually act on them.
Right.
Yeah.
Because not only does it help you in your work life, but it also helps you in your personal life, right? And it drives you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I can't say my parents didn't do a great job raising me, right? But I mean, when it came to like work, specifically in this industry, because this industry is not easy for women, right? It kind of depends. Like, so it's not the same as it now. Like 20 years ago was completely different.
Yeah.
20 years ago, a woman going onto a mine site was either going to be a janitor, a cook, or likely something administrative.
Okay. Very much the support roles.
Right. Right. No leadership roles. Like no one taking the, bull by the horns kind of thing and running with it. And the ones that were there was actually kind of quite foreign. And it was almost like how some of the men didn't even know how to take it. Right.
What do we do with this female?
Right. I mean, I know some women that were safety officers, but did those men really respect her? Right. Like when she said, hey, like if she identified a safety issue or, and stuff like that, it was, it took a little bit for them to kind of like grasp the idea. Oh, she really is. She's actually saying
she's legitimate.
Yeah. Okay. She's here. All right. We got to do it. So it would take a few few runs at it. Right.
Okay.
But I think it's all about attitude too, right? Like it's all not necessarily attitude, but I mean, it's just how you are, your demeanor, right? If you're not outspoken, if you're an introvert, like you're going to get run over, right? If you can't just say what's on the tip of your tongue, and then because you don't want to offend someone, do it anyway. It's just I did, right?
Just speak.
Absolutely, like because I would do my rounds like when I was after I had moved from site to here, and after a number of years, then I had to start doing tours to other mine sites, and I remember going back specifically to Snap Lake, and I had to go meet the mechanics, and it was the lead mechanics. I had to check in with them. And it was so funny. I walked in, I was like, what's his name? Chester. It was like, it's fine. It's a name I don't normally hear.
Okay.
Right. And so they called him Chest. And I walked in and I was just like, dude, pull up the zipper. Right. Because I can understand it because it's a mechanic shop. Right.
Yeah.
And it's pumping so much heat and it's winter. So you couldn't even crack the door to right. So it was really, really warm. Right, but he's wearing coveralls, but he's got a zipper all the way down, and his chest is there, and he's all sweaty, and I was like,
full Saturday Night Fever.
right? I'm like, no one wants to see that. Like, cover that up, right?
And zip that up.
And he's like, but pretty, and I'm like, I'm sweating it up, right? And then you looked over to the right, and I'm like, oh my god, you got to take that calendar down, right? And it was just like going into an auto shop, right? And the pin up of a female, and I'm like. It's completely offensive. You can't have that. Like, well, he goes, I like that calendar. He goes, my wife gave it to me. I said, I know. I said, but however, in this day and age,
yeah.
I said, if I'm around, it doesn't bother me. I said, but you got to have some way of being able to cover it up if someone comes in that does take offense to it.
Yeah.
I said, so,
and the conversation too about taking offense is so interesting because if it's potentially offensive, that takes some thought and action, right?
Yeah.
Because who's going to be there? So it's always an interesting piece of the puzzle. It's like, well, I might not be offended, but somebody else might. So the notion that someone might be offended by something is kind of the bar of, how are you going to behave? How are you going to act?
Yeah, I found in the last 5 years, and it's probably because it's a new generation now, right? Is find a lot of groups have become really sensitive.
Yeah.
And, poor HR department, they're always correcting me or always reminding me, right? Your P's and Q's. Like when I talk to clients, I know how to talk.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to listen, and I know the kind of response that they want, and I know how to work with them. Now, when it comes to just everyone in the office or even my own employees, when I'm interacting with them in the lunchroom, when I do visits and stuff, it's the sensitivity part that throws me off.
Okay.
I'm just like, hey, you're sensitive, right? You almost don't want to even speak sometimes, right? Because you're scared that you're going to offend someone. Well, so it's just like, oh man.
And for me, I find it so interesting because levity, humor, I mean, it's subjective, but it's so important. Like it's the it's the air in the day. Like it lifts you up. It makes it fun to come to work and have a laugh and do these different things. So yeah, it's, I find a lot of things are very, very serious.
Yeah. I mean, and I sometimes, depending on what meeting I'm at or, or who I'm having a discussion with, I'm constantly joking, right? Like I'll say something just because why not?
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, like going to site now, like, I specifically bring Sarah along with me a lot of times because she'll shoot me that look. Right?
Like, did a no look? Like,
yeah, stop saying that, right? But sometimes too, though, like, I mean, even when I go in and I do like a town hall with my employees, I'll even ask them, like, does anyone get offended by jokes? Right? Like, how are we feeling today? Are we feeling a little sensitive today, or like, are we okay? You know what I mean? So,
do you think
it's almost like checking the temperature?
Yeah, and do you think that the sensitivity? Do you think it kind of brings people down sometimes at work?
I feel like it does, because I feel like sometimes you have to be, you know what I mean? Like, especially like I said, if you started 20 years ago and you've been on the same mindset for 20 years and you've acted a certain way all the time.
And it's been okay until.
And then, until like almost 5 years ago, like I'd say like just before COVID, right? I felt like a lot of policy and process and the do's and the don'ts really started to be elevated.
Okay.
And like it's always kind of been like some things have always been like, okay, it's said, it kind of overlooked. And then you walk away and you're like, should I have said something? Like, and corrected them.
Okay.
And then you kind of let it slide. But now I find, because it is wrong, I guess, or someone said it's wrong, the things are a lot more strict.
And do you think that that's helping anybody in the industry, specifically women in the industry? Is it helpful, or is it trying to collectively find our footing on how to behave at work? What's your gut on that?
Well, so I'm older. So I typically don't take offense to like a lot of things. Right? Like I am not sensitive in any way. You can come at me in any way and I'm going to be sure.
You'll be okay.
But I do have a bubble, right? I'm very sensitive on people being too close to me. And that's
okay.
And that's the one thing. I will joke with you. I'll laugh at, the rudest joke in the whole wide world because I think it's funny, right? And I won't take offense to it. If I see something, I will say something. If I see like a guy saying something kind of on the line, inappropriate to another woman, and unfortunately, a lot of teacher women are not outspoken.
Yeah.
And I am.
Yeah.
I'll be like, hey, she's very uncomfortable. It's very clear.
See what's happening here?
I'm not sure why you missed the signs, but they were there.
And how does that end up? Like, is the person like, oh, sorry, or are they like offended because you called them out?
They're almost surprised. Like, really?
Great. Oh, like it's truly good new information for them?
Yeah, it's like it's never been said to them before. It's like, but it's a mindset, right? And I find a lot of the changes. I just don't even know why someone said it was rude to tell off color type jokes. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously, it can't be like racial type jokes, but just goofy jokes or funny jokes, like, right? And not take offense to them.
So there's an edge that's acceptable, and then there's too far. So for you personally, how do you know when someone has gone too far?
Like jokes wise, or just
generally, just in their behavior, or in
as soon as someone puts their hand on someone else, that's too far.
Oh, okay.
I'm not a fan of that.
Okay.
Yeah. If someone extends their hand and wants to shake my hand, not a problem.
Because it's optional.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They can take it or not take it.
Okay.
I'm not a fan if someone comes up and like rubs my back. Or, or you know what I mean? Like, or just touches your arms.
Even just hearing that, I'm like, no.
Like physical contact has to be agreeable.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes you see, like, when you're at site, some, they probably don't even mean it. Like if they need, like if someone's working on a computer or a laptop and someone leans over and they're trying to see your screen, or you know what I mean? They don't even realize how close, like the proximity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you're in my bubble.
Yeah.
Right? You are in my bubble. So, and some people just don't even see it. They don't notice
Yeah,
it,
it's very different,
or
person to person.
right. And then even if your desk is faced a certain way, if the person has to come all the way around to see your screen to get that close again, there's a reason probably why their desk is situated that way. You missed it. You missed the mark.
That's interesting that you're really tuned into the proximity.
I'm just not. Yeah, I'm not. Because I don't like people touching me.
Yeah.
So I'm comfortable with.
So you
not
notice that
touching
better.
them.
Yeah.
And I also notice it on other people. Right? Yeah.
And you, with your example, you were saying like she is uncomfortable. So how are you reading that?
Usually it's the body language or even the face. You can tell, or mostly body language. Like if someone doesn't want to be touched or tapped or hugged, right? You can see that they squeeze in tight, and then they lean away.
Yeah.
They keep leaning, like they're almost like tipped.
Yeah.
And you're like, you don't see that? I'm uncomfortable. I can see it.
You reminded me, I was having a conversation at a conference. And I'm like, I don't know how much further back I can move, man.
Yeah. Like a close talk.
So close. He was, I think he was hard of hearing.
Oh, okay.
And so I was experimenting with ways, and I just kept getting a little bit louder, and I'm like, is this loud enough? Can this keep us at a comfortable conversing distance? But yeah, well, I know exactly what you mean.
Well, it's so we're going to a conference next week called Roundup, and I like this conference because when you check in, they also give you those little stickers that you can put on your badge or on your body.
Oh, okay.
And it says, I'm friendly. I don't like body contact. Like it has, yeah. And you can, so that you pick, there's 4 that you can pick from, right? And I'm like, yeah, okay. Just stick that on there. Yeah, I'm not comfortable with the whole, yeah.
And that's neat because that's a nod to diversity.
It appeases to everyone.
Yeah.
Right? You can't take offense if you see it, right? Like,
yeah. And if they see it, or forewarned. But some people behave accordingly.
But some people are huggers, or you know what I mean, or touchy-feely.
Yeah.
I know a couple of people like that.
And it's different too. It depends. Like sometimes you can get a feeling for the person's intention. Yeah. I was never a hugger until we moved to South America, and that was a customary greeting. And holy cats, was that hard for me. I'm like, okay, let's hug. Also, let's hug you, and I will hug you as well. It was such a different environment. But I'm like, okay, well, I guess this is how we do. Hello. And to not do it was going to be even more uncomfortable for me. And it was going to be harmful to developing friendships and saying hello and fitting in and all the rest of it. So the dialogue in my head was like, it's okay, 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 it's okay. It was just, I had to work at it because it was not my natural. And then the funny thing is when you're like same culture, both of you in a different culture, you're like, are we going to like Canadian hello? Or are we going to like Chilean hello? I'm like, we're going to Canadian hello. It's lovely to see you today. No contact. And it was like, okay, yeah. But all of us Canadians who were there completely had that experience. Because for me, hugging was very personal, was very familial. And that was it.
Yeah, it's like when the French meet, right?
Yeah.
You're like, why are you kissing me on my cheeks? But
there were double kisses as well. Yes.
Yeah.
In Santiago, and it was interesting. But I had to almost flip into like an anthropological mode so that I could be okay because everyone was just so touchy-feely and close. And it was just, it was wild.
It's funny, because the first time I traveled and went across when I was in France, of course, I didn't study on the culture. I just wanted to check out Europe and all stuff and
see some French.
And I was with my aunt, and she never said anything. And then we went, and I think it's like the place we went to. And first person went to grab me and do the double kiss. I was like, oh, wait. Then my aunt jumped in. Yeah, my aunt jumped in and did the, started talking, Francais there and then did the double kiss. And I'm like, oh. Do you know them?
I was going to say, do you know that person well enough to do that?
She didn't even know him, right? So like, it's just like, it's a tradition thing. I'm like, oh, okay.
How do we do this?
Yeah. No, I let them kiss my cheek, but I didn't kiss back. So
Okay.
I was just like,
And how old were you when you went the first time?
I was in my early 20s.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was like just laughing because I was just like, yeah. Probably scared the guy because I jumped right back. Like, oh, hey, what's happening here? Lesson learned though, right? Because you're in your early 20s. So after that, every time I went and visited a new country, I started studying. I looked up like what are the do's and don'ts, right?
How do we greet each other?
Yeah. Right. Like, all right.
Yeah. That's awesome. So when you're in your work in the mine, do you have much contact with people from other cultures, or is it mostly Clecho people, Northerners, Southerners?
No, it's
Like, is it?
It's a mix. It's a mix of everything, right? Because there's only just over 5,000 registered Clecho. So, and they require way more than that at the 3 mine sites that we have. So, no, it's a mix. There's easily, I'd say, 6 different types of Indigenous groups that work out of there. And then we have a lot of Southern Indigenous groups, and then Southern hires as well, and Northern hires. Right. So yeah, so it's a mix of culture. For the Northerners, there's nothing really new to learn, but probably just what the mine site wants you to know. Okay. Kind of like don't feed the animals, and typically the Northerners would feed the animals. So that's probably a big change, right? Like don't feed them, right? And then you're like, well, I have food right here, and I don't see them. Right?
The animal is there,
right? So right, and then Southerners, I think the big change for them is when they come on, like they have to take they got to take a course, but it's just like a video on Indigenous awareness, right?
Okay.
Not to offend, right? And don't prejudge until you get to know people, kind of thing, and also like what the expectations of the environment as well. Like don't throw your garbage. That was one of the biggest things like during construction season was, don't treat it like a construction site.
Oh, okay.
Right. So it was, and you are on a construction site, but you're told not to do that, right? Like treat it like this is your home, respect the land. And that's a big thing. So it's like the videos were great. Like they showed you the animals, I really enjoyed them. Like, and that was 20 years ago. So they probably got
it's pretty advanced.
Yeah. So now, So it was great because, right. And very clean. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I see more garbage on the streets in the city than I would see there.
Yeah.
And the mine was all 3 mines actually are very serious about how they treated the land and, like when they do leave, like what will their footprint be? Mm-hmm. And in their minds, none.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the goal.
That is the goal. Yeah. Right. So I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, it is interesting. But earlier in career, when I was looking at different things, mine closure was something that I was always really kind of fascinated by because I have a background in biology and my partner has the background in engineering and mining, civil, geotech, and water. Yeah. So that's his background. And looking at it, it was always, to start with the end in mind. And it'll be interesting to see with the closures that are happening here in the north, to see how Diavik handles that. And it's having a huge impact, not just on the land, but on the people as well. So how are you looking at the mining industry, or specifically the diamond mining industry here in the north?
We're less than 18 months away from Diavik's closure. We've already been in the planning stage of what's next. Right? Like we have some long dedicated employees on that site, and Talicho has to kind of figure out like what's the next steps for us and for them. Because we don't, we want to make sure that we keep our, our long-term employees employed, and
they worked for it,
right? Because that's hard to find dedication. People that are really committed to a company nowadays. Because it is, rule of thumb is every 5 years, you're supposed to change it up. Just so you don't get bored. Trades is a little bit different, right? Like, obviously, like trades, you can't, I'm a welder. All right, in 5 years, I'm going to be,
there's going to be a certain amount of welding no matter what.
Yeah, right. See, that's a little bit different, right? But
yeah,
that's kind of that was the one thing my dad taught me. Like every 5 years, change something up. Otherwise, you'll be in a rut and you'll get bored of what you're doing.
Okay.
Right? So, and I've done that every 5 years in this company. I've changed something up in my role that actually kind of made me want to stay.
And kept it fresh.
And
appealing. Yeah.
Usually was always changing on it, the change of a project, going something different.
Okay.
Keeping what I have, but adding on to my portfolio and building on that until I saw closure on something. Like a couple of my projects that we do.
So
remediation.
With remediation, yeah, that's interesting. So with your career progression, what allowed you to be able to change things up every few years?
So this company, well, specifically with me, I've been super lucky. They've been really supportive, right? It's also because I'm very driven. And I kind of knew what path I wanted to take, where I wanted to be, who I wanted to work with, who I'm great to work with. And with the company, the higher you go for the leadership. So it kept changing. I've outlasted every CEO and CEO of the company, right? So, and all I had to do was have a chat with them and I let them know, like, this is my goal.
Okay.
So it wasn't a surprise.
So it was very co-planned or at least understood.
Yeah, and they kind of just said, like, if that's your path, no one really they didn't throw any hurdles in front of me. Okay. So they just kind of supported me along the way, which I thought was great. Because obviously, like, I'm extremely dedicated to the company, and I've always have the best interest of the company. And if you have that, I think that's why they were so supportive.
And I think too, just knowing you, it's because the company is working for the people. Like, I think you have a really strong grasp of what the company can do for the people. Yeah. And then your dedication to the company, I think, is also a dedication to the people that you know.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Because my, a couple of years ago, my portfolio got added on to, right? So now I also have the community operations. Mm-hmm. And even though I'm in those community operations, and I go to those communities, a lot of the residents work at the mines. Mm-hmm. The majority of them are my employees, right? So if I'm there and I'm doing something else for the operation piece, they'll come over and they'll chat about work. And, sometimes, being Talicho and talking to a Talicho, they're a lot more comfortable in expressing how they're feeling, or if something's wrong, or, or something's great, that, they'll open up a bit more, right? So especially when they're in their own community.
And they'll come to you with things to share that things are going well.
Absolutely.
That's pretty cool.
And that's the great thing, because they're employees, but I don't walk around saying, hey, I'm your boss. Everyone just knows that, I'm Betty Ann, and if you got a question, ask her, and she'll either find you the answer or she'll get you the answer, right? Or she'll already know the answer. It's going to be one of those, right?
Yeah.
So, and if I can't find it, I'll definitely, do everything to figure it out for them, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm very supportive, especially when ones that say, like, my spouse is going to school and I know they need a temporary exit from their community for a little bit, maybe a year or something, have to go south because of family. I'll do everything to support them in that, right? As long as they're coming back.
And make sure that there's a path back home.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. So stuff like that, right? Like I'm very supportive when it comes to that. When it comes to the females that we hire, I've been doing Winter Road for easily the last 17 years at 3 different mine sites. And then Divic by far is one of the easier ones to work with. And they're actually more receptive on accepting females working Winter Road, which is kind of exceptional, really, if you think about it, because they're pumping fuel, they're climbing tankers, they're doing all these crappy jobs that no one else on site wants to do.
Okay.
They reek of fuel, right? And
Highly flammable.
right, and it's usually it's always been kind of driven towards young men doing those roles.
Yeah, okay.
And then when I started slowly bringing on females, like I think 50% of the current Divic winner road this year is actually all females, all Clecho females.
So actual equity.
Right. So, which is kind of funny. And I don't know, like, I mean, I speak to some of them on the phone
Mhm.
and I resumes and I work off a lot of like I vet them, right?
Mhm.
On how on decide who's going to do it, but I don't get to see them.
Okay.
And then once in a while I'll have to go, I'll do something and then someone will show me a picture, probably on Facebook. And I'm like, wow, this young lady's all dolled up, right? Like the crew, like the nice hair and the makeup. And I'm like, oh, that poor girl, I just put her in a hard hat, glasses, big old heavy duty thing. And so it's funny because I've seen them actually do selfies and post it. Like, look at me, right? Like they're in their full work uniform.
So there's a lot of pride.
Oh yeah, it's so funny. Like, look at me. I'm going to climb a tanker in about 20 minutes or something, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so it's funny. But out of all the 3 mine sites, like Dive is actually quite receptive on taking them, because the girls are actually on time. They're keen. They listen. They almost have a point to prove.
So how did you find them? Did they come to you? Did they?
So
Like, how do you know that they're ready?
we post, right?
Mhm.
So we post for the roles, and then when we look at the resumes and we're checking them out, one of the key ones that I'll look right away for is the ones that have actually taken that course, introductory to mining,
Okay.
or introductory to what's called introductory to the workforce.
So they don't just say that they're interested and it works for them. You're
No.
looking for someone who has proved that they
A
are
little bit driven, right?
interested.
There's got to be have some drive there.
Yeah.
Okay, because I've had tons of coworkers or key Clecho leadership in the communities say, "Oh, hire my kid," type thing, but the kid is not ready.
Right.
So you hire them, and then things backfire, right? So now, the position I'm in, like, because I do look at every name that's brought forward to represent the company I oversee,
Mm-hmm.
I will say no to that.
And that has to be okay.
to avert, you know what I mean? And I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Right. I can justify the reason.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like I've had people do that, and then poor person didn't even last 48 hours. Because you got to remember, a mine site is remote. We're about 200 kilometers away from Divic, and that's the second furthest way. And Gadget is the closest, but they're like 160 kilometers away.
It's still far.
And it's all fly in, fly out.
Yeah.
So if you fly in, it's completely isolated.
Yeah.
You don't have family. You might have, look, the best thing I do is I tell them when they do go to the site, try to find your friends. Because you need that support. If you don't have it, I've gone to site and being in the women's bathroom and can hear a young girl or a woman crying in the next stall or two, right? And then, so you don't know what's happening in their life, right? So, you finish and you're like, you wait a few seconds and you ask, are you okay? And they're just like, I didn't realize how isolated it was.
Oh, and that's a common response.
Yeah. And I think the fear of not being able to just jump in a vehicle and go is not there, scares them, and maybe being away from home kind of thing. So that's that comes through your vetting process. You ask them certain hard questions, right? Like, are you going to be okay?
How long have you ever been away from home?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the big thing too, right? Like some of the young Clecho that come out now, a lot of them haven't even left their community, and some of them this is their first time leaving, and that can be super overwhelming, very scary. No support, right?
Then you go from knowing everyone that you encounter
To knowing no one. Yeah.
Or maybe one or two.
Yeah.
And maybe they're not your favorite people.
And then when like the downfall of the mine site sometimes too, though, is if you ever go to do a visit, is the orientation. I'm not a fan of it because it happens so fast. Most of these mine sites are quite large. And unless you have a really good memory, you're definitely going to get lost for the first 4 to 5 days.
Yeah.
Because I watched people and I thought, oh my geez, that's a lot of information you're throwing at them.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of like, okay, you're good. And they pat you on the back and away you go. And you're like, okay, well, you left me in the lunchroom.
Did you point me in the right direction?
Yeah. And then you're like, okay, so I'm just going to sit here. And then, and then all of a sudden a supervisor comes along and they bring you and you do your thing or whatever. I mean, it just it was weird because the last time I went to site, we had a new hire go and she had just finished her orientation. And she had just on her first day out in the field, she got back. And so we were doing our presentation and everyone kind of just like vanished, right? I was in the office doing something and then Sarah was doing something, talking to someone who came out and there was like no one else except for her. And I'm like, hey, I said, you okay? And she's like, can you help me find those steps? She says, I know I'm on the lower level. I just can't find them. And I'm like, right? And they don't provide you a map of like, hey, here, this is where you are.
I would want it printed. I would want a printed map and I would keep it folded up until I had internalized all of the directions.
Absolutely, right? And
Analog never hurts.
I felt so bad for her. So I was like, nope, come on, Christine, let's go. I walked her right up to the top and I said, okay.
And now?
I said, now you're down the hall. She's like, I know where I am now. I said, okay. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Let's err on the side of you. Yeah. You tell me that you know where you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. But that's the one bad thing I see.
And it's interesting too. It's not just a transition of new people and new things, but I think it's a completely different environment. You're going from, if you're
to an industrial building.
It's like, what's the biggest building in a community that they would have been in?
Probably the school,
right?
Maybe the school or the. Yeah.
So multiply that by about 400 and spread it out across a few
pipes and steel beams and
nothing homey about it.
Dust, very. I walked into a commercial, industrial looking building that's full of dust and no one smiles. As you're walking down the hallway,
the guy's got a zipper all the way.
Yeah, so that kind of
roasting.
Yeah,
in his coveralls. Yeah. That's so good. So this has been a great conversation, and I am so happy to hear your story and your path and all the rest of it. And to wrap up, what would you looked back on the industry, and where would you like to see it go? Like, what changes would you like to see come for women in the industry? From the industry and from women as well.
I think from the industry, I think I want to see less lip service. There's always
more walk, less talk.
Yeah. I think on every one of them, they all say, well, we're going to provide leadership and mentoring, and to give them more senior roles. And it's always been a fight for females. Again, you have to be the kind that's going to be outspoken and kind of push your way that way to get the role that you want.
And say, where's that path?
Right. And it's in the IBAs, it's in the participation agreements, or it's in the Indigenous benefits agreements, right? It's in the agreements, all written. It says that, but they're doing all this Indigenous hiring just to fill a quota. Okay. We said we're going to hire 55%, right? And it doesn't, like, as long as they're Indigenous in the north, so that could be Waikiki at Ben or the Kate show, the Cleat show, right? It could be like any of those three, as long as they've hit their number. But if you broke down the number and actually look to see what positions do they fill, right? So when you look at the IBA, I think that the number is very small for like senior type roles, like maybe 2%. But if you actually broke it down, there's none in that role. But
so it shows up on paper, but not in practice.
Right. So who's actually enforcing it? Right. So you're just taking your royalty that they give you annually, right? I mean, it's also a government thing too, right? Like each self-government should be going in and saying, hey, you failed here. So is there a penalty for not delivering? Yeah. Or what is your plan? How come there is no one in that role? So I wish wish there was a little bit more push on that. Yeah, just because, like, chances have to be given.
Mhm.
And then once they're given, you got to take them, right?
Yeah.
Right, but if the opportunity's not even there, or like, so stuff like that, if opportunities aren't there, no one's going to know that they could go a little bit better. They don't have to just be pushing a broom, cooking, or all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because I'll be truthful, I would have never went to the mine site doing that. That would not have been anywhere near my top.
Would not have appealed.
Would have not have been my top 100. I barely even do my own bed now. So I'm thinking, like, why would I want to make someone else's?
That's awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
But when I do go, like, the good thing, like, I mean, obviously, having the mines generates employment. But on the bad side of things, because these young ones are getting these jobs, they might not be, entry level jobs, but all of a sudden they're starting to get a steady income, starting to fill those pockets a little, starting to like that, and all of a sudden, well, I'm just going to take a gap year. Okay, I'm going to take a second gap year, a third gap year. It's, you know what I mean? Because now the decision making time is, well, do I need my steady income to go to school, which could get you something better, right? There's that internal fight
trade-off,
right? There's that little internal fight that they're having, and you can see it. And when I do my business this site, I'm like, why are you still here? I thought last time we talked, you said you were looking at the fall, right? I'm like, just do it.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
You do that, you come back, I guarantee you I will find you a job. I don't care where it's going to be, but I'll get you one. Right.
And that's interesting because the employment is there, the numbers are there. On the surface of it, it looks very supportive and very fine. But what I'm hearing and what you're saying is there needs to be a pathway evident. And so for the people who are doing the jobs to seek out what is that next thing. It's interesting that that's one of the offerings that you have. It's an informal part of your job, but that mentorship that you can offer to people who are young and maybe even less young. So women and young people who are looking, I think that tends to be the demographic that is least likely to be keen on working in a mine, for a number of societal reasons and practical reasons and all the rest of it. So having that opportunity spelled out and apparent, and then having that encouragement to, take that leap.
Well, even like we're saying mine industry, and everyone just assumes it's remote. I mean, they can get the education, but I mean, mine industry is also in Yellowknife, right? The main offices, or in Calgary, there's a main office, right? Like so you're still part of the industry. Yeah. You're just not on a remote site. So I kind of also like to remind them of that as well, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of work in the mining industry that doesn't even require PPE.
Right. You don't necessarily have to put on all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. So I want to thank you again. This has been fantastic.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Resourceful Women is a product of the Prospector News. Opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speaker and speaker alone. Resourceful Women is for educational and entertainment purposes, and nothing in the podcast should be taken as investment advice. Always consult with a licensed personal financial advisor before making any investment purchases.